Hi, I'm Kelly DeRolf, the GreenSpace Sustainability Program Manager at Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. I work with all of KIB's IPL project GreenSpaces after they're implemented to assist those communities with maintenance. Today, I'd like to show you some of the maintenance that I need to do in my own front yard and in my own native planting that's right behind me. This planting is about 200 square feet and was implemented about 2 years ago. The first thing I'd like to start off with is identifying some of the common weeds. Those weeds that I typically find in my front yard include tree of heaven, thistle, violets, dandelions, and occasionally turfgrass. So let's get started. Another common weed that I find in my yard is tree of heaven. So this particular tree of heaven, you can tell that I let grow all the way from last summer. I must have missed it because it's in the corner here. But typically when you find tree of heaven, whenever it first sprouts, it's going to be about this big, and it's super easy to pull because they don't have very deep root systems yet. The best way to tell that it's tree of heaven is you're gonna see this little mitten on the edge of its leaf right there. So typically they're not that difficult to pull out, but because this one's a little older, it might give us a little bit harder of a time. So I'm gonna use our soil knife again. This right here is thistle. One of the easiest ways to identify it is its furry leaves with thorns on the side. Thistle is one of the trickier weeds to maintain because it has what's called rhizomatic roots that connect this plant to that plant and then all of the plants that you see around it. So when you go to pull up thistle, wear gloves. Also, if you have a soil knife or some type of similar tool, that would be great. You want to pull it across and dig around. The deeper you're able to go for that long root, the better. If you don't get all of the root, it will just grow back. So it's really important that you get the entire root of the thistle out. The larger the plant is, the longer this can get. Here you'll see wild violet. Easy to identify this time of year since most of them have their flowers, but when they don't, you'll see that they have these little heart-shaped leaves here. These are relatively easy to pull up, and a lot of people like to keep them in their yard, but for the purposes of our native planting, we're gonna take them out. So you see there, they have a pretty short root system. So what we see right here, which I think most people might be able to tell, is a dandelion. When they don't have their flowers, they can be easy to identify by their ribbed leaves right here with the little notches. Dandelion is similar to thistle in that it has a very long root, so you're going to want to do a really similar method where you pull it aside, dig your soil knife as deep as you can, and then get that entire root out. So there you go. Here's an example of a spot where turfgrass has invaded into my native planting. You can see that right next to it is bee balm. So what we're gonna wanna do is pull it back to its base, dig in like that, struggle, and there you go. Typically turfgrass has a pretty shallow root system. The only thing that makes it tricky is it grows very densely and it does pretty well in compacted soils, so it can be kind of tricky to pull out, but there you go. So the next thing we're going to work on is removing the dead vegetation from last year. There's two different ways that you can do this. One way is removing the dead vegetation in the fall when the plant dies back. The second way is the way that I've decided to do it in my yard, and that's to wait until the spring when you start to see new growth and then remove the stalks. This year, I even left the stalks in my yard for some time after, just in case there were still any nesting insects inside of the stalks. By leaving the stalks up over winter, you provide valuable habitat for those insects that we're trying to plant these native plants for. So let's get started. Now that we've removed all of the dead vegetation, the next step is mulch. I like to mulch my planting about once a year, and I put it about 2 to 3 inches thick. I also usually just do it with my hands, but you can also do it with a rake if that's what works best for you. Mulching this time of year acts as a great weed suppressant, and it also helps your plants stay warm and hydrated. Now that we've finished up mulching, there's only one last thing to do, but first I'd like to talk a little bit about pollinators. One of the coolest parts about having a native planting like this in your own yard is how often you get to see pollinators every day throughout the entire year. Habitat plots like these provide crucial habitat for these insects that like to go from space to space in urban settings. If you're looking to become more engaged with this type of work, there are also plenty of organizations like the Monarch Watch organization that you can certify your habitat through. This particular organization is geared towards the conservation of the monarch butterfly. They also take the data from your yard and put it on a map of the entire United States, which is pretty neat. So the last thing we have to do is to water the 2 trees in my yard. These 2 trees came from the Adopt a Block program fall tree distribution that happens every year. If you're not a block captain, I highly suggest signing up for the program. These trees need 15 gallons of water every week between the months of May and October. I typically use a 5-gallon bucket filled 3 times to slowly water them once a week. Thanks for joining me in my garden today, guys. I hope you're able to learn something. If you have any questions, you can drop a comment or shoot us an email. If you end up using any of this content, please share it on social media at KIBIORG. And if you have any other questions, feel free to visit our website at KIBI.org. Happy gardening!